Thanks for joining. I appreciate you for coming on. I guess we'll start with a introduction from you. Just kind of walk through some of the work you've done and kind of what you're doing now. So
cool. Well, thanks so much for having me, Mikhail. I'm a big fan of yours as of late.
Thank you. And your dad, of course.
And my dad is a big fan. He might be even a bigger fan of yours than me. Let's see. Well, I grew up in California, then I moved to New York, and now I'm in DC. And I was in the nonprofit space for a long time doing kind of counter-Islamism, counter-terrorism, Israel advocacy. And then I switched to broadcast journalism, and I was a producer at Newsmax for a little bit, and then a producer at Epoch Times for a few years. And I just recently quit Epoch because I got an offer to write a book about this growing identitarianism on the right. And so now that is my job full-time, is just writing this book. I have a tight deadline, and that's what's been filling my days.
Wow. So what is, as far as your book goes, like what is kind of the main thesis of it, I guess? We'll start there.
The main thesis is essentially, well, it's the audience is meant to be MAGA conservatives. I consider myself a very proud pro-Trump MAGA conservative. And so my message to others is essentially, yes, MAGA is a big tent. That's great. It's probably what won us this election. But if we're looking ahead to a post-Trump world, you have all of these kind of sub-MAGA factions that are trying to take up the post-Trump mantle and insert it with their own agendas. And there is a very, very sinister phenomenon that is posturing under the guise of like America First, that is trying to position themselves to be the inheritors of the, America First torch. But in actuality, they are the exact caricature that the left has always painted us conservatives as. They are racist. They are anti-Semitic. They are They are identitarian. They are. I don't know, what is misogynistic, right? Like the exact caricature that the left has painted.
Like hardcore patriarchist. Like that's how I try to explain it to people when they ask me, what is because a good slang word for that people are using is woke, right? Which I'm sure everyone watching this has probably come across that term now, especially if you've watched this channel or follow either of us on Twitter. But, the best way I can describe that to people is look at what the radical left is constantly accusing conservatives of being. That's who these people actually are. Because
and the worst, right.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and the worst part of that, in my opinion, which is something that I think just the political class is blind to, is these people are all of those things, but they're not actually America First. They're not actually patriots. They are actually pro-China, pro-Russia, pro-Iran. They are pro virtually all of our major enemies, denying that they are our enemies at all. And therefore, if they should gain power, they pose a very, very critical threat to MAGA and also to the conservative movement and also to America and to the West, to Israel, of course. This is kind of, the book is basically a wake-up call for MAGA to get real, to reassert its red lines, its values, what it stands for, its principles, and not let our party and our movement get corrupted by these extremists on the right, in the same way that extremists corrupted the Democratic Party. And now you have the entire majority of the party beholden to these progressives, these radical progressives, which have really destroyed our country in a lot of ways. So that's a short thesis.
No, that's great. And that's very needed right now, because I think a lot of people are, I just made a video about this the other day about being susceptible to propaganda in the alternative media spaces, where we kind of think, oh, we're not watching CNN or Fox News or ABC or NBC or whatever anymore. Therefore, we're free. We're good. We don't have to keep our minds guarded, and we don't really have to keep the same levels of discernment when we're watching podcasts like Tim Dillon or Tucker Carlson or whoever, right? It can go from comedians to influencers to political pundits who are no longer part of the establishment, and we just think we're free of propaganda because they're not on the big channels. And they're not owned by the big guys, even though a lot of them are, which is the funny part. They still are in a roundabout way. But I just think there's a lot of this going on. A lot of these people are subversive, and they're pushing an agenda and pushing narratives that are contrary to what we as, MAGA conservatives are, the things that we actually stand on. They're just kind of going in direct opposition to those things. And they're doing it kind of what you said, all under the guise of, we're America first. Let's make America great again. They use all the slang and all the words, but that's not really the same thing BLM does with the phrase Black Lives Matter. It's this.
Right. And many of them actually hate Trump now. They've completely deserted Trump, but they claim to be the actual, MAGA America first adherents.
Yep.
So they really, we there's no reason why we should be welcoming these people that have actually discarded the leader of our movement. I don't know why we're still acting like they are part of our movement when they have literally gone so far as to say things like Trump should be impeached and he's just controlled by the Jews. And, it's so sinister.
Candace Owens.
And it's so true what you said about independent media, because actually Konstantin Kisin had an incredible piece on this. He called it Podcastistan, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that we all kind of had this naive idea of the internet when it started out. And then I think we all had the same kind of idea about when Trump was freed, what that was going to look like, and just these noble principles of free speech and stuff. And in actuality, like independent and alternative media and Podcastistan is susceptible to all of the same ideological and financial conflicts of interest that corporate media is, and special interests and, foreign influence. It's susceptible to all of the same things. So it's just two sides of the same coin.
And it's no less susceptible, I think, is what people really have to understand is, I think, you notice this, especially in the wake of COVID. I think that was like the big wake up moment for a lot of people as far as the mainstream media goes. And really, even before that with the first Trump administration, that was a big wake up call for how corrupt the corporate press is in this country. And, COVID obviously made that worse. BLM made that worse. Other things since then have made it worse. And I think a lot of these so-called independent podcasters, you look at the Alex Joneses, the Tucker Carlsons, the Candace Owens, et cetera, they've really pushed that, like, hate mainstream media, hate it. That's just all they talk about is how corrupt mainstream media is. And then they, at the same time, present themselves as the alternative voice. They're the ones speaking the truth. Just tune into their channels and they'll tell you what to believe. They'll give you the correct information, but it's no less, BS at the end of the day. A lot of it is what I'm realizing. And it's something that I didn't even really realize was as bad as it was until about a year ago. And, leading up into the Trump election, I just started to see, especially with the anti-Israel, really, I don't fast forward or rewind a little bit further. Ever since the October 7th Israel stuff really kicked off, and then you just see this giant narrative push one direction against Israel from all these people, just like that, in lockstep. And it's all these so-called independent voices just in lockstep preaching the same narrative at the same time. And you look at the mainstream media, and that's exactly what they would accuse the mainstream media of doing. Look, CNN and NBC and ABC and CBS, they're all telling you the same things on the same night that are in lockstep with the same narrative. It's like, this is exactly what these people do. Right. As soon as that clicked in my mind, I was like, oh, this is no different. It's just marketed differently to a different audience. Mm-hmm. And Absolutely. we think when we're on the internet, we're like, we're good. It's this podcaster, we're in the right spot. We can trust these people because they were kicked out of the establishment because they're truth tellers. And it's like, no, it's not the case. Maybe some people that's the case, but not a lot. So,
right. Totally.
So I have a question for you. And this is probably more in line with some of the work that you've done and some of the things that you're interested in. What do you think it has led to the aggressive anti-Israel narratives on the right, specifically on the right? Because we've seen this on the left for years, and we're now seeing this almost, this parallel equal happening on the right. Where do you think that came from? What led to that? What's fueling it now?
It's a great question, and I think it's a confluence of factors. I think that you can't really understand the rise of anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic rhetoric unless you go back to COVID and you understand how much trust we lost in our institutions and how many conspiracies ended up being true that we were trying to alert the public to, whether that was the COVID coming from a lab in Wuhan to the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, to Russiagate, to vaccines. I mean, there were so many. Conservatives were so censored and silenced for speaking truth to power, and we were shut down and immediately called conspiracy theorists. And then we were vindicated and proven correct on so many of these conspiracies, and yet there was no reckoning or accountability. And I think that really broke a lot of people's brains in a way. And I think the right just increasingly went in a conspiratorial direction. Mm-hmm. And obviously there are conspiracies, independent conspiracies in the world, and you have to be sensitive to those and discerning. But the second that you see everything through the lens of a conspiracy, eventually the next step on the train is anti-Semitism. You eventually arrive at conspiracies about Jews, especially things like Holocaust denial, because that's how anti-Semitism has always functioned since its earliest days in ancient Egypt, then to Jesus Christ, and to the Enlightenment, and to pogroms and the Inquisition and the Holocaust. Anti-Semitism has always been at its core a conspiracy theory, a worldview about Jews that punches up instead of down. So instead of looking at Jews as, inferior, which is how a lot of other hatreds operate, like anti-Black racism or, misogyny, and there is that too in anti-Semitism, but simultaneously it also punches up in that the Jews are actually, they've always been seen as being part of this cabal that is manipulating and pulling the strings of geopolitics or communities, or local communities, whether it's poisoning the wells or geopolitics being behind every war, or controlling governments, or being responsible for the plague and diseases, whatever, or for killing Christ, whatever it is. That from its earliest days, this is always how anti-Semitism has functioned. And I think it's because society has always needed a scapegoat to blame for when things go wrong. When you have a scapegoat and you're able to frame your ills as a conflict between good and evil, then the good people really bond together, and it's a very strong and fervor-filled, coming together against a common enemy. And Jews have served as that common enemy, that scapegoat throughout time. And so I think that after COVID, a lot of people started turning more and more to these conspiracies. And if you go on the internet and you let your mouse wander, you'll see every single ancient medieval conspiracy of the Jews right there in front of you, including updated anti-Semitic conspiracies that are the exact same. It's just the word Jew is replaced with Israel or Zionist, but it's the same exact tropes, right? It's not Jews poisoning the wells. It's Israel poisoning the water of Palestinians. And it's not the Jewish lobby. It's the Israel lobby. And it's not the Jews kidnapping Christian children and using their blood to drink matzah. It's Israelis, harvesting Palestinian organs and, whatever. So I think that's part of it. And then I also think after October 7th, I think X being freed by Elon Musk has had a lot to do with it, because I think what we've seen, as much as we wanted this to be a free speech platform, when we look at other free speech platforms like Gab or like 4chan or Parler, like every free speech platform that is kind of filled with political content, to my knowledge, has always devolved into an anti-Semitic hate fest. Yep. So much so that anybody who's normal and decent just leave because they can't stand just the cesspool of guttural bigotry on there. And so I think that that's what you're seeing more and more on X, is you're seeing it becoming like other platforms again, which have devolved into Jew hatred. And exactly.
And I think that goes back to that original point we were making about just the landscape of alternative media, it's a free for all. And like, I understand, and I think, that famous Doug Murray, Dave Smith debate on Joe Rogan, this is a point I think Doug was trying to make was, it's wrong to just assume because someone is claimed to be an expert that we should just trust everything they say. But it's also wrong to assume that standards shouldn't exist, and there shouldn't be a level of integrity or standard that's held for media, that's held for social media platforms, that's held for journalists, especially in people in politics. And this whole let's not trust the experts to let's trust everybody who isn't an expert is no better. It's like the same. It's the same thing. Right. And so as a result, then those people take over completely on platforms like 4chan or Gab or Parler or Rumble, and now Twitter is just under the same fate.
Right. But the irony of the non-experts who have been pushing this "don't trust the experts" line, which you and me generally can agree with, given how much we've been betrayed by the experts, especially in America lately. What's ironic is a lot of those people are trusting experts for their own points of views. Like a lot of what they're saying is so unoriginal, especially the stuff they've been saying about Israel or Judaism and stuff. Like, working in this space, they are just regurgitating the same things that I have heard for the last 15 years, as if they're original or as if they just discovered something. And the people that they rely on for this information are sources of authority. They get a lot of their numbers when they're talking about Israel from the United Nations, the same United Nations that's been pushing this, this globalist, one world technocratic government. But suddenly the UN can be trusted when it comes to Israel.
I just had
Are you
a
joking
friend
me?
send me this. It made me so mad. I had to walk away from my phone for a second. He sent me this clip of Benjamin Netanyahu giving his speech at the UN, and then all of those UN delegates walking out of the speech. And it was this clip from Andy Frisella commenting on it. Do you know who Andy Frisella is? He's a well-known podcaster, and he does other things too, investor and things like that. Anyways, he's been doing a lot more political commentary lately, and he was basically, Andy Frisella was saying, see, look, the world hates Israel. This means that you're on the wrong side. I don't remember exactly the words he was using, so I'm not quoting Andy directly, but the point he was making was, you're on the wrong side of history if you're supporting Israel at this time. The whole world hates them, and this proves how bad Israel is. And it was just him commenting on the clip of the UN delegates walking out of Benjamin Netanyahu's speech. And I was
you cannot get more establishment
than
Andy
that. Frisella and all these so-called woke right people, the same people who cheered on Donald Trump when they did the same thing to him? And aren't you the same people who have been cheering about, being anti-establishment and pushing against the grain and pushing against the globalists? Well, you're looking at a room full of globalists there at the UN who are actually responsible for a lot of the things they're falsely accusing specifically Israel of, and they're cheering them on when they walk out of Netanyahu's speech. It's this is the best information you have as far as, whether or not we should believe these narratives about Israel. This is it. And this is honestly what it boils down to. It's silly stuff like this that's completely contradictory.
Yeah. It's the appeal to manufactured consensus, which is what us as conservatives have all been complaining about for years. And now
with COVID,
people that claim to be on the right are guilty of doing the exact same thing.
It's mass. Remember when everyone was saying the term mass formation psychosis in regards to COVID? That's the same thing.
Yeah, that was what's his name? Matthias Desmet. Yeah, we had him on my show a few times. Yeah, it's the exact same thing. Yeah. You're right. Completely.
And I mean, even a lot of these anti-Semitic tropes that you were mentioning before, I've had friends, even in real life friends, not just random bots or people on the internet, come up to me like, hey, did you hear about this, about Jews and this? And I'm like, this is stuff that the Roman Catholics, the medieval Catholics were saying 1,200 years ago, and you're acting like this is some new thing, or this is exactly what Hitler was saying, and this is how he, sparked and agitated the German people into joining his cause against the Jewish people. I'm like, and you're sitting here acting like kind of what you're saying. This is new information, and oh my goodness, we just discovered who the real problem is, and we just discovered who the globalists are. Right. It's like, okay.
I know. Candace will be like, I read this book. Everybody should read this book. I read a book and it's in this book
Yeah.
and you guys should all read this book.
I don't think she reads.
And we're like, oh, wow, we're so proud of you for reading a book.
Yeah.
Like, congratulations. And she's saying that because she just read this book that nobody has essentially read it before her, or she's just discovered it. And like, this book has been out for like 40 years. And literally they teach this in every single like radical left-wing progressive, like political theory
Exactly.
class.
Yeah.
Like,
and so with all these anti-Jew narratives and all this crazy stuff going on, the term Zionism gets thrown around a lot, and it's usually used in a negative connotation. Again, I've had many people online throw that term at me. You're a Zionist, and it's always pejorative that they're trying to use against me. I've had friends talk about, that being America first is like being anti-Zionist, and I always ask them, what do you mean? Because it's one of those word concept fallacies, I feel like, where people use a phrase and they can mean 100 different things by the phrase. Same with the phrase Christian nationalism or America first or whatever, right? There's a million phrases like this. What do you think the phrase actually means?
It's so simple. And every single Zionist, whether they are a liberal Zionist or a conservative Zionist, whether they hate Netanyahu or love Netanyahu, whether they are a religious Zionist or a secular Zionist, they will all tell you that it means the same thing, which is the belief in the right of Jewish self-determination in their indigenous homeland of Israel. It's the national liberation movement of the Jews. If you, Mikhail, believe that the Jews have a right to have a national homeland in Israel, then you are a Zionist. It has nothing to do with Palestinians or Arabs. It has nothing to do with whether you think the West Bank is occupied or not. It's, Zionism precedes all of this stuff. And there was Zionism before the modern political Zionist Theodor Herzl, who essentially revamped Zionism in the form that eventually culminated in a political sovereign state. But it's a very simple belief. It's a very simple movement that was spawned by this belief, and it covers a wide range of opinions, but fundamentally, everybody
agrees
on this one premise.
Nationalists that are saying they're anti-Israel be very pro that, if they were being consistent to their own set of beliefs?
Well, of course, if they believe in nation states, right? If they believe in the sovereignty of individual countries, and if they are against, like they've been saying, globalism or one world governments or global citizens or any of this stuff that these multilateral institutions are trying to push on us, then they should all be Zionists, because a Zionist is someone who believes in a national identity for Jews
in its essence.
It's completely anti-globalist. It's one of the last remaining anti-globalist and anti-imperialist movements, right? Because if Jews were sovereign, 3,000 or so years ago, and then they were essentially, colonized by God knows how many groups of people, from the Babylonians to the Assyrians and the British and the Ottomans and the Greeks and the Romans. Now they are reasserting their sovereignty, and they are existing as a sovereign national state, and that, if anything, is like the most post-colonial, like anti-colonialist and anti-empire and anti-imperial movement that we have seen in its modern form today.
Why would all of these so-called people? This is what I can't understand, and maybe you're not supposed to understand it because it's nonsensical and it's completely contradictory. But again, why would all these so-called, especially the Christian nationalists, they talk so much about nation states and preserving nation states and it being anti-globalist all the time. Why? And a lot of these same people are very, very rabidly anti-Israel and anti-Zionist from their own words. I don't understand how they could be anti-Zionist if that's the premise that they believe in. It just doesn't make any sense to me unless they're liars, unless they're stupid and they don't understand what it really means.
Right.
Who knows?
No, I think it's for a number of reasons. I mean, one, they themselves have been propagandized by the multiple, by the multiple forces out there who hate Jews, but it's not acceptable anymore to couch their rhetoric in blatantly Jew-hating tropes. And so they have to come up with some sort of more palatable, acceptable language. So if you just replace the word Jew with Zionist or Israeli, that somehow that becomes acceptable. And then in terms of our institutions, just as our institutions have been pushing out, anti-white and anti-conservative and progressive ideas for decades, they've also, a core component of that is also anti-Zionism. They have also been pushing out anti-Israel ideas. The media, the halls of the UN, as we talked about, academia, and even industries like healthcare, or mental health. I mean, the exact same progressive ideology that has been pushed out to the public and infected such a large population in America, have also been pushing out this anti-Israel propaganda. But the thing about conservatives is they can fall prey to this anti-Israel propaganda because anti-Semitism has always been the thing that unites the left and the right. It's the thing that the left and the right can agree upon. And the reason is because anti-Semitism is whatever you want it to be. The Jew, like I said, is a scapegoat. So you fill it with whatever you need to fill to essentially make sense of your life. So so the right can say the Jews are globalists, and the left can say, the Jews are capitalists, and the right can say, the Jews are fostering illegal immigration, right? And the left can say the Jews are, colonialists. So it's just really, it's one of those forms of hatred that is wide open.
It's really it's a weird alliance between the far left and the far right with that, because they're both claiming kind of opposite things about the Jewish people and saying those things are bad, but then they're linking arms over just the fact that they hate the Jewish people, even though the things they're claiming about the Jewish people are completely contradictory, given each side. It's crazy. And I've just noticed this a lot, especially with, one of the big reasons I got into posting about this stuff specifically and talking about the woke right is because I saw so many friends in real life, at church, in other places, get sucked into this stuff. And it's like they're falling for the exact same things that they were just, harshly accusing their liberal friends of falling for 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. It's just the same thing on repeat. And so I'm trying to think of some objections here to what these people would say. I think what I hear a lot, as far as what we're talking about with Zionism, is people will say something like, well, Israel is just way too involved in the United States, though. So being pro-Zionist is actually being globalist because look at how much they lobby here in the United States, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What would you say to that?
I would say absolute nonsense. I mean, even if you look at the numbers of how much, for example, let me just say one thing and then I'll back up. If you look at the numbers, AIPAC versus, and you look at other countries, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and you look at our enemies, right? Like Iran or the CCP, and you look at how much they spend on lobbying versus AIPAC, it's pennies. AIPAC doesn't even top the, meet the top 50 or something. But the other part of this is that AIPAC is not a foreign lobby at all. AIPAC doesn't receive any money from the government. That's what makes you a foreign influence, is that you actually take money from a government. So when people talk about, the CCP lobby and China's lobby, they're talking about the CCP lobby, like a lobby in America that is pushing China's interests, right? Based on the funds that they get from the CCP. Same with the Qatar lobby. Same with NIAC, which has, all this kind of stuff. But AIPAC is Jewish Americans who are lobbying for a strong Israel and American relationship. They've never lobbied for anything that is outside of American interest. They are proud Americans and they are proud Jews, and they see the incredible bond and the benefits that America reaps from its relationship with Israel. And so they lobby for that cause. And I don't understand, like, if you're against lobbying, then that's one thing, then be against all lobbying. But I don't understand why AIPAC, as the American Jewish community, is any different from like the, Armenian National Society that lobbies Congress, or, like the Hindu, blah, 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 blah. There's all these groups in America that lobby for their cause based on their own ethnicities, right? It's like for like every ethnicity, you have the Nigerian, this and this and that. And what are they lobbying for? They're lobbying for America to essentially, be doing things that are in the interest of Nigerian Americans, specific to Nigerians.
Yeah. And so, that's just the nature of politics today.
I mean,
people
this is
can
just like
dislike
a boogeyman.
it. People can like it. I'm sure there's a lot of legitimate arguments to be made against lobbying in general in the United States. I don't necessarily completely share that opinion, like the hardcore isolationist types, where we should just basically keep our mouths shut about other nations, not receive a penny from them, not give a penny to other nations. Lobbying in the United States itself should basically be non-existent of any kind like this. There's a lot of people that have that opinion. I would say more of the libertarian, Ron Paul, Thomas Massey adjacent types. And that's fine. People can have that opinion, but the disconnect is when they're almost exclusively applying that criticism to Israeli-related lobbies. And they don't talk about Qatar. They don't talk about China.
Exactly. But again,
it's not a foreign lobby. But again, in the first
AIPAC
place.
isn't
correct. Like I remember the interview that Tucker Carlson did with Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz said that, and Tucker Carlson basically was trying to make him out to be a liar, as if he's running cover for the Israeli government, saying that AIPAC is not a foreign lobby. When Ted Cruz is factual. Like, you criticize AIPAC all you want, people, but do so honestly. Don't say it's something it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why American Jews can't lobby for a strong relationship between Israel and America, but any other ethnicity, like why British Americans are able to lobby for a strong relationship between Britain and America. I don't understand that. And then and I also think that this AIPAC thing is such a dog whistle, because AIPAC and the Israeli government have historically been at odds. Like, they've had fights over things because AIPAC kind of is historically more bipartisan and liberal, and Israel has for decades had more of a conservative governing coalition, and so they have. AIPAC has been, has believed that we should send aid to Palestinians and all this kind of stuff. So a lot of conservative Jews like myself, we don't even like AIPAC. And here we are defending it because we understand that people aren't really objecting to AIPAC in good faith. They're framing it as something that it's completely not. And the amount of power that they ascribe to AIPAC is such nonsense. I mean, AIPAC couldn't even get Obama not to pass the Iran deal. They spent millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to get that deal stopped, and they couldn't do it. Like, there's a lot that they fall short of that they try to do that they're not able to
do. Where they blow it way out of proportion for the purpose of spinning this anti-Israel narrative at large. And they...
For sure, because it's a regurgitation. Because like I said, it used to be the Jewish lobby. It used to be a small group of Jews that were controlling governments behind the scenes and responsible for all the wars and all of the conflicts. And there was no Israel back then. So what did people say about them? They said, oh, they're lobbying on Jewish interests, right? That Jewish interests are somehow distinct from whatever country, France, Spain, Italy. And there's a cabal, and they're trying to manipulate the whole world to be subservient to their goals of Jewish domination. But now we can't say that anymore. So we just use the same template, and we just tweak the language a little bit, and we say all the same things, but suddenly now it's AIPAC, it's the Israeli lobby, because that is what.
But it's again, it kind of goes back to that point in the beginning where it's these same regurgitated tropes, these anti-Semitic tropes that are just applied to different situations depending on what time of history we're in. Yeah.
Completely. Exactly. One of the most perhaps the most famous anti-Semitic document in modern history is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is like a debunked manual that supposedly tells of this conference of Jews that are coming together and figuring out how they can manipulate and control the world. Right? It's a total forgery. We know exactly where it came from and who wrote it, and yet. It's still a bestseller in a lot of Arab countries, as is Mein Kampf. But here, it's like nobody talks about it, but everybody is saying the exact same things that are written in it. Like if all of your friends that are talking to you about, oh, you know what the Jews did, this and that, you should give them I mean, maybe don't, because they'll probably actually believe it. But you could give them a copy of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and be like, look, man, you guys aren't too original. This stuff has been said forever. Before there was an Israel, right? This is what people were saying about the Jews, and this tract that I'm giving you is the lowest of the low in terms of guttural Jew hatred. Like there is nothing worse than the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It is what is at the core of like almost every single anti-Semitic pogrom across the world from west to east is beliefs that you can find or link to what's in the Protocols.
I don't understand why there's been, well, I mean, I could probably come up with some theories as to why it's been so unbelievably popular throughout world history to specifically target Jews. I think there's biblical reasons for that. Like I'm a Christian, so I think that there's a specific spiritual sickness, you could say almost, that's always tied to attacking the Jewish people. And this seems to be like the thing every civilization does before it just devolves into utter chaos for some reason. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that there's a lot to be said about that. But I especially in the United States, I think that the reason people are doing it here, I mean, obviously that what I just said ties into it still here in the United States. But I think just one level up from that is just this frustration with globalism in general. Again, going back to COVID, going back to all these different things we've experienced, the World Economic Forum, the you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, the corruption of the United Nations, whatever it might be, which is ironic because now these people are citing the United Nations to justify their hatred of Jews allegedly being the globalists. So they're going to cite the real global. It's insane. But I think it's this frustration with globalism, and I know this from talking to different people, real life people online, and as a result, like they want someone to blame. They want a name and they want a face, and they want that name and face punished for all of the crimes we've seen at the hands of globalism over the last decade, 2 decades, however long it might be. And they've just assigned it to the Jews. That's the most convenient person to assign it to. And I think that's what we're seeing. Yes. Yeah.
Well, because it's all written for them. They don't have to come up with anything new. Everything they could possibly say about the Jews as a scapegoat it's already there. Whatever you believe, it's already been said. Yeah, no thinking. And I also think, that this demonization of Netanyahu as the face of who we want to blame as like the ultimate evil in the world is so ironic, considering most of these people, whether they don't, maybe they don't need more, but at one point they were supporting Trump, and they understand the global demonization campaign against Trump and how counterfactual it actually was. And yet Netanyahu is in many ways the same kind of figure. And I'm not even a big fan of Netanyahu, but not for the reasons that Candace Owens isn't a fan of Netanyahu, right? Like I'm not, I mean, in some ways he's great because he took Israel into the future. I mean, he took Israel from a very kind of socialized society and economically transformed it into a world superpower in terms of, tech and medicine and the environment and stuff like that. But, in other political ways, I have a lot of problems with Netanyahu. And yet the way in which the world relates to this leader is the exact same type of propagandic falsehoods and decontextualizations that the global media has been doing for on Trump since 2016. And yet these people that were so aware of that are falling prey to the exact same campaign against Netanyahu.
Yeah.
Like there's so many lies about Netanyahu.
On Twitter in regards to Netanyahu specifically is people will claim that he wants the war to continue between him and Gaza because he can claim this like kind of wartime, he can kind of hide behind the fact that Israel's at war. Therefore, he doesn't have to go to court and face some of these charges that have been placed against him in Israel. And, I looked up some of the alleged charges against him. They're kind of not really anything. Like it's similar stuff to like what Trump was charged with, where it's like, okay, so, what is this?
let me just correct this. Yeah. So there's two claims here. Like the first claim is that, he's essentially prolonging the war so that he doesn't have to face any charges against him. That is complete nonsense. Like you said, these charges, I think most of them have already been dismissed. Yeah. I think there was like 3 or 4 charges. I think they've all been dismissed except for one of them now. But anyway, so that's a complete just non-news item. That is absolutely false. And the whole campaign against Netanyahu in Israel is very similar to the campaign against Trump. There is another claim, though, that one of the reasons why Netanyahu has been prolonging the war is because he's been wanting to prolong when elections happen. Because as long as there's a war going on, there's not going to be elections. And, say what you will about Netanyahu's success in this war. October 7th happened on his watch, and the Israeli people remember that. And so there's a very, very good chance that Netanyahu will not survive after this. I think that's a more convincing argument. I'm pretty agnostic on it because I think it's possible, but I don't think there's any way to know. That being said, I also don't think that him that has been prolonged. Like what I'm saying is he might want to prolong the war, but it's not him that has been prolonging the war. The person that is most culpable in prolonging this war has been Joe Biden. And we can get into that if you want. But this war would have been over a long time ago, if not for Joe Biden's constraints, the leverage, tying one hand between Israel's tying one hand of Israel behind its back, the micromanaging, the absurd conditions, all this kind of stuff, which prolonged the war. So I don't think Netanyahu has been prolonging the war. I was going to say this as well. Does he want to? Maybe. I don't know.
That a lot of the people that I hear specifically mention the lawfare kind of that he's trying to prolong this conflict because of the lawfare that he doesn't want to go to court, yada yada yada. These are the same people who were going to MAGA, big MAGA rallies wearing T-shirts with Trump's mugshot on it that say, I'm going to vote for a felon. And like they had no problem with it when it was Donald Trump. Again, here's this double standard once again. But they all of a sudden have a problem with it. Yeah.
Completely.
And people should know how this works with politics.
Our favorite convicted felon.
If we're going to recognize how this works with Donald Trump, we should have some level of understanding how this could possibly be working in Israel against someone like Netanyahu. And I'm not even like a Netanyahu supporter. I don't even know that much about the guy. I kind of don't really have a dog in the fight as far as am I pro him or against him. But what I care about is just being honest. If people are going to critique anything, they're going to critique the Israeli government. If they're going, which I'm sure there's much critique to be had. If they're going to critique a politician, whoever it might be,
in good faith,
do it with integrity and honesty. Don't make things up in order to spin a narrative about someone that's completely in contradiction to what they said.
Right, and they do it. And that they do it in bad faith because essentially they use Israel's democracy against Netanyahu. So they use all the woke right. They use the fact that there's protests against Netanyahu or there's charges against him and all this kind of stuff as evidence that he is some sort of uniquely malignant force in global politics, when in actuality, they'll never say a thing about, Mohammed bin Salman or Al Thani in Qatar or Al Sisi in Egypt, any of the neighbors, any of Israel's neighbors. Why? Because they have closed societies. So you actually can't be free to be, to take charges up against a world leader, or to be protesting in the street, or to have ha'aretz, which is like absolute like leftist trash, complaining day after day after day about any conservative in power in Israel. Like Israel's a democracy. And so there's this unique microscope on it because of the freedoms that it allows. And then you don't realize that you are just blind to the authoritarian nature of the entire region. And what's interesting about that is if you tell that to these people on the right, they'll say, well, I don't care about those nations because we don't give these nations, $3 billion a year in aid. Stop right there. You're telling me we don't give Egypt over $1 billion every year in aid? Last I checked, we do. Okay. So like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? We do give other countries aid. And what has Egypt given us in exchange for that $1 billion? Absolutely nothing except for the fact that they have been oppressing and disappearing the Coptic Christian community for decades.
Right. Zip the
to
lip
all
on
you
that
right wingers who care so much about Christian persecution, right? Like if you care where your money is going to, if you care where your money is going to, aren't you mad that our tax dollars are going to a country where they persecute, where the Christian community is the most persecuted community in the entire Middle East? And they're also oblivious to the fact that aid is not only measured in dollars, it's also measured in resources and like manpower. And we have 40,000 troops in the Middle East, stationed in the Middle East, and we don't have a single soldier on the ground in Israel. So like, maybe we give them more money, which we don't even really give them because over 75% of it has to be spent in America. So it provides like tens of thousands of Americans with jobs, and we can get into all of that. And there's tremendous whatever, it boosts our economy and our qualitative edge and all this kind of stuff. But regardless of all of that, I mean, like, would you rather us not give Israel any money, but put a bunch of boots on the ground there? I don't know. I would rather, it's nice to have neither, but if you're gonna have to pick one, I would rather send money more than boots.
So I wanted to ask you about the kind of relationship between the United States and Israel right now. How does that relationship benefit the United States? This is, I think, another thing another talking point that I hear a lot is the relationship, the Israeli-American relationship is a parasitic one. We're not benefiting anything. We're just kind of what you're saying. We're giving them billions of dollars and we're receiving nothing in return, similar to countries like Egypt, which is the reality of a situation like that country. What are we like? What is the actual benefit of partnering with Israel, whether that's financial, whether that's other things?
Right. So there's a lot of benefits. And, the person who I would encourage everybody to look to who understands this better than anyone is Yoram Ettinger. He speaks about this at length, and there's no one that can discuss the practical elements of the Israel-America relationship better than Yoram Ettinger. But in terms of how America benefits, so it's really important to understand the context of how this aid, this MOU, $3.8 billion aid package like came about, and how, it's renewed and all this kind of stuff. It basically started under Reagan, but Obama was the one that essentially solidified this like $3.8 billion aid package. And he did it in order to essentially have leverage over Israel. And as a result, like the conditions that were placed on Israel as a result of this aid ended up long term, as we can see now, we can even hear from Netanyahu's speeches, it ended up being a net negative to Israel, because what Israel had to do in exchange for this package is they had to gut a lot of their military infrastructure in the industry. They ended up condensing their ground troops and gutting some of their most valuable units, and kind of focusing a lot more on technology and the Air Force. And they essentially offshored all of this military equipment to be manufactured in America. So what Obama did was he was basically like, look, you get rid of your industry in Israel, we'll make all the stuff for you, right? And then we will essentially give it to you on credit, which is what this aid is. It's not dollars. It's credit to buy military equipment. So we actually give like $0 in this aid package to Israel. We just give them credit so they can essentially
The
like
$3 billion
for
a year
free.
thing that people
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not dollars, it's credits, it's military credits. So then Israel can buy from America and get this military equipment for free, essentially, on credit. This has ended up, like I said, being disastrous for Israel. The most obvious example being October 7th, where Israel was not able to, it was the biggest intelligence failure perhaps in Israel's history. And if Israel actually had not been relying on what's this new doctrine called the small but smart army, they likely would have been able to prevent it. And even in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, like you had soldiers going into Gaza and fighting, Hezbollah that didn't even have basic gear. Like they didn't have enough gear to keep their soldiers safe. It was just atrocious. And a lot of this is because of the like codependent relationship with the United States. So that's one thing to understand. So that paints a negative picture of this aid in terms of how it has affected Israel. Now, America, on the other hand, has reaped incredible benefits from this aid. Way too many for me to actually be able to remember in this conversation. But a few that come to mind are things like it providing almost 60,000 Americans with jobs. So one of the conditions of this aid, which again isn't really aid, it's an investment, is that the vast majority of it, some people say 75%, some people say 90%, I think it was different at different periods of time, so I don't know what it is now, has to be spent in the US, which means that it employs tens of thousands of Americans. There are like some like little like towns, there's like this town in Arkansas, I don't remember what it's called, where like if you just cut the aid, right, to zero, this entire town would lose their livelihood. Because the entire town like is working, as part of our like, military industrial complex for this purpose. Even in places like Boston, they employ a lot of people to serve these ends. And then people will say, well, they're just contributing to like a bloated, a military industrial complex. Like, I think that's actually the most compelling argument that I've seen, but only a few people will say that kind of thing. But another benefit. So anyway, okay, yes, bigger military industrial complex, but on the other side, it saves us billions yearly, billions annually. So God knows how much in total in R&D, in research and development. Because essentially if you go to like Boeing or other contractors and manufacturers that make this military equipment, they will tell you that they are in constant contact with Israelis who have the actual on the ground battle tested know-how. And they work with the Israelis to develop this equipment, and it ends up saving us so much in learning how to develop this stuff. That's another thing. So you have to put that against this $3.8 billion, right? Another way it benefits us is when we give this weaponry to Israel, they actually use it. They use it in combat, right? Like a lot of the things that we make, we don't use in combat. We test it out. Like we don't really use F-35s in combat, for example. Israel does. So for example, we'll send an F-35 to Israel. Israel will test it out. They will come back to us and they will say, oh, you gotta like tweak this and this and this. The engineering on this is kind of off. And they will tell America how to improve their weapons. And then America has this incredible quantitative edge over other countries and becomes like number one in terms of defense, in terms of defense innovation. And they can maintain that type of, that type of competition and be like the most the most sought after and the most well respected and the most innovative of the global defense,
wouldn't America first apparatus. People want that?
You'd think because I mean Trump's whole thing is peace through strength, right? Like we want to have he want to have a strong enough, like it's tough, right? Because at the same time, you don't want to be like, you want to de-bloat our military industrial complex because there's so much, bureaucratic, just reckless spending that does not need to be spent. But on the other hand, you want to have a strong enough military that it tells our enemies, like, hey, you don't want to fuck with us. You know what we have. You know what we can deliver, right?
Yeah,
if not for Israel's know-how that they share with us, we would not necessarily be on that level.
I think an important caveat that you kind of made there is building a strong military, building a strong, even a strong government, but doing so in a way that's responsible, that's not adding to unnecessary bloat, which of course is a lot of that. I mean, look at like the CIA's black budget and how many billions, if not trillions of dollars they spend on stuff that they're not even necessarily reporting on, no accountability, all the red tape and regulation that's going on in the FBI and other places. It's insane. Throughout all of our, throughout our entire military, this is the case. But, that's when people are arguing against that, I'm with them. But when they start arguing against just cutting things for the sake of cutting things, well, now we're not having a real conversation about, are we cutting things that are actually keeping us safe in the current world that we live in? It's not perfect. The whole concept of isolationism and just laying down our weapons is not going to work today. It's just fantasy land at that point. But are the things we're cutting actually responsible, or are they things that are going to hurt us in the long run? And is a relationship with a country like Israel going to have a net positive on those things? And I think that it does ultimately.
Right. I mean, people don't understand how many, and I actually learned this when I got my master's degree in counterterrorism. They don't realize how many Islamic terrorist attacks are actually foiled in the US that we don't even hear about because they don't happen. And much of this intelligence is shared from Israel. Right? Israel will carry out very complex and successful military offensives against terrorist groups, from Hezbollah to Al Qaeda that deal with, drug trafficking and intercepting systems and stuff like that. And they share what they have discovered and what they have learned with America. And that really increases our national security. I mean, it increases our airport security. There's the most secure airport, as I understand it, in the world is Ben Gurion, and it's because they actually do things very differently than the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. But they've definitely helped us just in that regard. Like our airport security has been so dramatically upgraded because of Israel. So there's so many active Israeli contributions to our national security that no other ally would be able to perform. In the face of threats from not just Islamists, but even, like Chinese and Russian influence that we get from Israel. Game-changing operations. Yeah. I mean, and there's so many things that would have happened that we have been even just Israel taking out like Syria's nuclear reactor in 2007 and Iraq's nuclear reactor in 1981, I think. I mean, these were operations that would have had like global ramifications, right? So whatever damage or negativity you think Israel is injecting into the world, you wonder how the world would have looked if Israel had not actually undertaken these operations against enemies of the U.S.
And I'm sure there's a lot of bad things that are going on. I mean, I just watched this episode. Do you know who John Kiriakou is? He's like a former intelligence officer. He was just on Rogan's podcast. Interesting guy. Okay. He was just talking about, he's basically has this whole story where he was framed for whistleblowing on this torture program, the CIA torture program. And so his whole story is fascinating for those of you that want to go listen to it. But he talks a lot about just government bureaucracy and government corruption and all this behind the scenes stuff that's a complete mess. And I think a lot of that's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. But just like that's the stuff that you don't see on TV, and that's the stuff that you don't see reported, all that bad stuff, this like deep state corruption, you also don't see a lot of kind of what you're talking about, this good stuff where a massive global crisis is prevented because of a relationship between countries like this. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword in a way that I think gets ignored. And so this whole narrative, in other words, where it's just this parasitical relationship and there's nothing we're benefiting from, and they're just a parasite on the entire world. And it's just not, there's no evidence to back a claim up that's especially that large. It's just not true. But
yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt that the return on investment that America gets on this 3.8 billion is like at least like a few 100%.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and again, you turn on people like Tucker Carlson. He's never going to mention any of that ever. It's one sided. He'll talk about the some corruption that happens in the government one way or the other. He'll never talk about things like this. There's never a positive, or like, he won't give you a whole picture of what's happening. It's this one sided lying by omission narrative.
No.
Yeah, which is the case.
Absolutely.
It's the case for most of these people.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's really a shame. And, you know, I will say I'm one of those. There's actually here's something else that they won't tell you. There's a huge contingent of Zionists, like rabidly pro-Israel Zionists like myself, who actually think that in the long term, getting rid of this $3.8 billion package would actually be better for the US and Israel. But it has to be, because I just don't think I think it ends up creating a far more transactional relationship that is very dependent on who is in power in the White House. Whereas I believe that if you got rid of this aid package and you could still have all of these strategic partnerships and everything like that, I think that it would create a much healthier relationship between the two. But because of all the benefits America gets, and because of how Israel has been now gutted, you know, in terms of so much of their military manufacturing, that they need America now, it can't be just cut off overnight. Like, it needs to be phased out, and Israel needs to be able to like build up their own infrastructure, right? And industry, and America needs to, you know, figure out like how it's going to maintain this, you know, quantitative edge, and what it's going to do with these jobs and all this kind of stuff. And so I believe over time it should be phased out, but it has to be. It has to be in good faith and with the understanding of the benefits and the disadvantages in mind.
Something you said there was interesting. Another kind of, paradox with a lot of the narratives around Israel is, I think that you have a lot of the same people who are saying that Israel would be completely lost without us, which at the same time they claim that they're so powerful that they control the most powerful nation in the world.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Right. I know. I love your tweets. I love your tweets where you're like,
they're weak and feeble and they need us. And also they're the most powerful agents in the entire world. They control the entire Western hemisphere. These are the two things we're being told at the same time. But,
I know. You have all these great tweets that are like, oh, wait, I'm supposed to think this and this about Jews, but also this and this. And they're all just like,
it begins to make no sense. Yeah. But I think something that's another point there is, they want to cut Israeli funding, which would almost necessitate them to lobby even more. But they also complain about the Israeli lobbying in the first place. So it's like,
that's a good point.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's again, this inconsistency in the narrative.
For sure. And also, like, you know, keep in mind, right, they want to cut this funding, and they want to cut the relationship so that, you know, there's just two countries practicing their own sovereignty that aren't dependent on each other. And yet, when Israel does something that is out of line with, you know, something that Trump wants them to do, you see this entire woke right community be like, see, Israel like doesn't even respect America, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, but you don't want them to be beholden to America and vice versa. So which is it? Like, either they are their own sovereign country that makes their own decisions, or, you know, their hands are tied by whoever is in power in the US, and they just do the bidding of whoever's in power, right? And I mean, this idea that Trump is owned by Israel or owned by the Jews is just so insane. I mean, you think Israel's happy about Trump signing this executive order with Qatar? Yeah. You think Israel's happy about this 20-point plan that they'll get their hostages returned, but that will very likely leave Hamas in power? Of course not. Israel is constantly having to adjust its own goals and its own interests to essentially keep the peace between Israel and America, because they know that they have to, that without this aid, that you know, they're going to be in dire straits if another October 7th happens.
Yeah, I even think of that one viral clip of Donald Trump months ago when he was frustrated with Netanyahu during that whole Iran little scuffle that was going on. And he basically said something like, it was like a hot mic, like, they don't know what the F they're doing or something like that. It's like, does that sound like something that someone would say who's being completely manipulated and controlled by Benjamin Netanyahu,
Right.
especially in public press? Probably not. Like, it just goes to show that this relationship that they think exists doesn't exist. Once you start adding up all these facts and looking how this is unfolding, it's like, if what they're saying was true, these things would not be playing out the way they are. It's just that simple.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Totally. What are we at here? We're at about an hour. So we'll wrap it up here. Any closing remarks? Anywhere people can find you, I guess, would be a good place to end this. Obviously, you got your book coming up. You got.
Yeah, that'll be out in 2026, and I'm very active on X. It's just my last name and my first name. So it's at RHEA KARYS. And yeah, no, I'm glad that we got a chance to talk, and I really appreciate, you sticking up for the Jews and being, so Christian in your convictions about it. I'm glad that we met and that we're fighting this fight together. And I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll do this again for sure. This is great. A lot more to talk about with this stuff. So appreciate it. Thanks everybody for watching. So
thank you.